Pope Benedict XVI is dead. An 800-year-old prophecy is set to be unleashed.
Is the prophecy true? The signs are literally all around us.
The prophecy foretells the coming of the final pope and the end of time.
The book of Daniel speaks of judgment coming on the earth, a resurrection of the dead. No flesh will be saved.
He who takes the holy crown after Benedict shall be named Petrus Romanus.
He will actually be the false prophet of biblical fame that helps give rise to the Antichrist.
Written over 800 years ago by an Irish monk named Malachy, the prophecy of the popes predicts the end of time. Could that end be upon us?
This is going to be a time of the greatest tribulation in world history. In fact, the Bible tells us that a third of the Earth's population will be destroyed.
According to Malachy's prophecy, Pope Benedict's death will trigger an Armageddon, as described in the books of Daniel and Revelation.
Around the world today, prophetic signs seem to be unfolding at breakneck pace.
The prophecy of the popes tells us that with the death of Pope Benedict XVI and the election of Petrus Romanus, Rome will burn.
Apocalyptic prophets like Malachi from the 10th century on are prophesying against Rome because of what they see as its opulence, its power, the arrogance and greed of the high churchmen.
Scholars call this period of time the pornocracy. It's characterized by corruption, all sorts of immoral activity. The papacy had degraded and became guilty of all sorts of unchristian types of things.
When apocalyptic prophets talk about Rome, they talk about punishment for what they perceive as wickedness here on earth. And they're not thinking about future punishment a long time from now. They're thinking about future punishment today or tomorrow. They see the apocalypse as something necessary.
An ancient prophecy exists that raises questions about the future of mankind.
Well, the prophecy of the popes is a list of 112 phrases. At first glance, some of them seem vague, but upon investigation, there seem to be some very compelling reasons to believe that this is a true prophecy.
Here we have a list written in Latin by a simple monk that accurately tracks the lines of popes from his time to ours over an 800-year period with what can only be described as miraculous precision.
Did God choose a simple Irish monk named Malachy to deliver his apocalyptic warnings to the world?
Malachy O'Morgair was a bishop in Armagh, which is now in Northern Ireland. And of course it was his dream, like it was many faithful in that day, to travel to Rome to meet the Pope.
Malachy leaves Ireland on June 12, 1139. His small party won't arrive in Rome until May of the following year. An epic journey across a dark and dangerous continent.
During the 1100s, the world was a brutal place. There were plagues, there was violence, so traveling from Ireland to Rome was an extremely dangerous journey.
Throughout the journey, Malachy claims to feel the presence of God guiding him and giving him strength. But when he at last reaches Rome, he is in for an unpleasant surprise.
Malachy has just completed this 11-month journey across Europe. He has seen the most heart-rending conditions, poverty immeasured. And now he arrives in Rome, and probably the last thing that he expects to see is the opulence that surrounds the Pope.
Malachy is furious. How could such extravagance exist in the church? How could Pope Innocent II allow such indulgence in his own house? Retreating to the hills overlooking the great city, Malachy is overcome with emotion.
Propter impietatum summorum pontificum, Roma mos excura.
Nobody knows for sure what happened to St. Malachy, but something did happen because he began to write a series of 112 Latin verses or mottos, each of them describing every pope that would exist, from Pope Innocent II to the final pope.
And so, in anger and disgust, this simple monk creates the Prophecy of the Popes. The document also spells out what will happen once the list of popes comes to an end. The destruction of Rome.
About 3 years after Malachy returned to Ireland, Pope Innocent, whom he had met with, died in 1143. And the pope that replaced him was known as Celestine II, whose family had a castle in Umbria on the banks of the Tiber. Why that's interesting is because in the Prophecy of the Popes, it said that this numbered pope would come from a castle on the Tiber.
We can really just look to the last 4 popes and see some astonishing examples of accuracy. Paul VI, his motto was flower of flowers. His coat of arms features 3 flowers, the symbol of the French monarchy. John Paul I, from the midst of the moon. He was born in the diocese of Belluno, which means beautiful moon, and he ascended to the papacy during a half moon and then died 1 lunar cycle later. John Paul II, from the labor of the sun. Not only was he born during a solar eclipse, he was buried during a solar eclipse. The motto for our current pope was from the glory of the olive. Many Catholic scholars were expecting a pope to come from the Benedictine order, symbolized by an olive branch. Cardinal Ratzinger, who was not a Benedictine, was elected pope. But then, to the astonishment of everyone, he picked his papal name as Benedict.
According to Malachy's prophecy, Pope Benedict's death will trigger an Armageddon, as described in the books of Daniel and Revelation. 800 years ago, in the hills above Rome, an Irish monk named Malachy writes a prophecy that traces a path to a catastrophic end of existence. If the prophecy is true, all it will take is the death of Pope Benedict and the election of Petrus Romanus as Pope to bring our way of life tumbling down.
Is the prophecy true? There's 800 years of evidence that these predictions are tracking towards an accurate moment in time.
Despite centuries of hard work from the Enlightenment through the detailed, careful science of the 19th and 20th centuries to explain natural phenomena such as earthquakes, plagues, tsunamis, you name it, some people still choose to believe that these things are not the result of natural mechanisms, but are the result of God's wrath being visited on a sinful and wicked world.
According to the prophecy, there will be no answer that man can come up with that's going to stop the spread of this end times plague. Think what you will, be as skeptical as you like, but the time of great tribulation is already at hand. In the next few years, maybe even months.
Malachy's prophecy of the popes and the destruction of Rome it envisions will be proven or disproven very soon. For some, the end truly is near.
If Pope Benedict dies or is somehow otherwise replaced by Petrus Romanus, the end is here and there's nothing anybody can do about it.